There are lots of new terms flying around in this latest tech era, as with any tech era, let's be honest, and it's hard to keep up with what they mean and then how they fit into whatever environment, applications or concepts or building things, etc. A term that has been used for quite a while but has become part of many AI conversations, and yet it still remained a loose definition, is the term knowledge graph. We'll talk about some recent content that sets a good definition, and then also chat about my latest conference I attended last week. Whether you're considering attending or maybe speaking at conferences, hopefully my thoughts about various conference factors will help you decide how to narrow down your search for the best event for you. First, let's start with the blog post on what is a knowledge graph. This was something that was published by my colleague a week or so ago and really sets a good standard definition for what is a knowledge graph. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and that has been loosely defined in different ways for quite a while. It's something that I felt has been a little bit confusing for a while. Standards and definitions, whether you agree with them or not, can be really good so that you can set and forget, basically, where, okay, I have this definition in mind of what I understand this concept to be and not to be. And then I can go into something, an application or solution or a meeting or whatever, talking about this concept and knowing when that term applies and when it doesn't apply, or when a solution fits that term and when it doesn't. So, okay, we have a knowledge graph here versus a RDF graph versus a property graph versus something else entirely. But let's talk about the actual definition here that was discussed in the blog post. The definition is that it stores data and relationships alongside the model, or in the blog post term, it uses organizing principles. I view this much more in kind of the data model terminology, but again, that kind of differs depending on who you're talking to. However, the key concept here is that it stores the data and the relationships in between the data alongside the model or with the model. You can use a knowledge graph for different solutions, which the blog post outlines a few, things like applications for a variety of use cases, search and discovery, and then recently with the introduction of generative AI, using knowledge graphs to ground generative AI solutions. For instance, providing curated data that helps guide the LLM to a more correct or more consistent answer. But this idea of knowledge graphs is not new, and it's not something that Neo4j has done alone. In fact, Google got there in 2012 with the idea of strings to things. They talk a little bit in the blog post about how Google search used a knowledge graph first in their search approach. So Neo4j is not the defining factor of this. This concept of knowledge graph has been around for a while and again has been used in a variety of different contexts. But the components here are nodes, relationships, and then the organizing principles, or in my mind, data model. Then the blog post goes in and talks a little bit about property graphs versus something like an RDF or triple store model, and then also differentiate it between relational databases. So while RDF is a type of graph, it's a different format and different concerns than a property graph, which is Neo4j's foundational model. And then again, both those things are different from a relational database. Now again, knowledge graphs can be used for things like generative AI search applications, fraud detection, master data management, supply chain, investigative journalism, drug discovery in the healthcare industry. Neo4j has seen a lot of uses for graphs and knowledge graphs in these spaces and used very successfully. The blog post wraps up with some ways that you can get started with graphs by linking to an ebook. I would also recommend creating your own instance of a graph database and putting your own data in there and really seeing and getting a good feel for how this stuff actually works and what it's doing. I feel like the hands-on experience is sometimes the better, faster method, at least for me as a developer. The second thing I want to highlight is the DevUp conference, which I just got back from last week. I really felt that this was a really fun, encouraging, inspiring event, but different than some of the ones I've attended even just this year. I have attended DevUp once in the past. That was pre-pandemic. So this was the first time I'd been back since then. It's a local event, so very near to where I live. It's also a smaller event. We're a smaller city, smaller environment. Things like Vegas or New York or San Francisco are going to be much larger tech events just because of the locale. But also, DevUp has been around for almost 2 decades now, and it has focused since the beginning heavily on .NET developers, which is not my area of expertise. However, if you look at the website and then just for me looking at the content, there was a variety of other topics. There were some other Java themes, as well as just career-based themes and some other front-end developer type stuff. The one thing that I really, really loved about this event, probably the best, was the pacing and the content. So the sessions were 1 hour long, and I ended up presenting 2 sessions there. So it gave me a good opportunity to get a technical deep dive on something, to demo something, to give the conceptual background, to walk through things really well. And I felt it was a good balance between very technical details and overview details and stuff combined because you had that time to do both. I also really felt that other conference speakers were in that same boat. They were able to really deep dive into certain topics. You didn't feel like you were getting just a dusting of one topic and then on to the next. I also felt like you had the hour-long sessions and then you had a 15-minute break in between. This was superb for taking bio breaks or snack breaks or grabbing someone in a hallway track and connecting and networking with people, but also just digest the last hour of content you had heard. I've been in a few different conferences where the timing and pacing has varied. So shorter length sessions, longer length sessions, shorter breaks, longer breaks. And I've always felt a little bit that either you had too short of a break or too short of a session. But this I felt was a really good balance between the two. You had enough time to really deep dive into content, and then you had a good 15-minute break for kind of administrative things, as well as really enjoying and soaking up the conference material too. Another thing that is super important, of course, as humans and developers, is the food was good. The opportunities to network were really good. Again, given that time and the space, I really thought was excellent. There was a nice long lunch break on the days so that you really could connect with people, chat with people, and yet also take a little bit of time and maybe get some work done. You didn't feel like you had to pick between the two things. The attendee party was a lot of fun. Smaller event, so therefore the environment was not as noisy, not as packed. You felt a little bit more of a connection and building those relationships vibe, and that was brought over into the attendee party as well. Food was good, entertainment was good, but just that one-to-one connection with other developers, you had plenty of time and space to do that. So when you're looking at conference events overall and trying to consider, should I go to a conference event? Should I speak at an event? So on. Really look to what your preferences are. Do you want something that's a little bit more of a smaller conference, maybe more networking opportunities, maybe more focused on a certain tech industry or tech segment? Larger events, you're going to have a lot more things to do, a lot more content, a lot more broad topic strokes there. So weigh those options and pick and choose which you feel is more valuable to you. Also, with big conferences, major companies are going to sponsor or run those, organize those, because they're going to have the big budgets for that kind of thing where you have thousands of developers. But you're also going to see big announcements or latest breakthroughs in the technology space. So that might be more important and vital to you. I would really weigh these options and understand the value and the downsides you're getting from both. Should you attend a conference in general? I definitely would recommend it. Should you speak? I recommend at least considering it, and I would encourage you to do it. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I love doing it. Again, I'm slightly biased because I kind of do it for a living now, but I really enjoy it and thrive off the inspiration and the learning, interacting and sharing with others. To wrap up today, the Knowledge Graph blog post really helped me know and apply the criteria that determine a knowledge graph. Now I can use that foundation to build other concepts on top of that. I also gave my review on the DevUp conference and recommendations on events or speaking opportunities you might want to consider. I hope you'll join me again next week. Thanks for listening and happy coding.